Maybe people can get a little bit closer. Yeah, a little bit closer. I know. Those signs do, they come out. Oh, that's great. That's great.
Thank everybody for coming.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody, for coming. I'm going to start things off here today. I know we have a bunch of people who are going to speak, but I'm just going to start off with a song. And goes a little like this. Up on Herbert's farm, up on Herbert's farm. Please tell Mr. Firk, don't take away my work. I just want a farm, I'll do the land no harm. Up on Herbert's farm, up on Herbert's farm. Clean water and clean air, that is what is there. So let me keep my job, if the land you will not rob. Up on Herbert's farm, up on Herbert's farm. Right here, Mr. Firk, my family, school and work. We live above the Ole Out, the springs it cannot do without. Up on Herbert's farm, up on Herbert's farm. Find another way, don't you see me mowing hay when you sit down to eat, but from the land comes the feast. Up on Herbert's farm, up on Herbert's farm. See the eagles, Mr. Firk, the north winds making easy work. They circle and soar high above the creek, the valley, the land I love. Up on Herbert's farm, up on Herbert's farm. All right. Thank you all so very much. That's Jan Mulroy's song. Yeah, Jan. Great. So I know a lot of people have a lot of things to say, and I don't know who's going to be first after me.
Who's on first?
Who's on first? Why not Mr. Hebert himself?
Yeah.
Please welcome Don Hebert.
Good morning. And I do thank you all for coming. And for anybody that doesn't know, the Hebert family farm was right down on Henry Edwards Road. The house that we built is actually on a portion of that farm where we built our retirement house. And our retirement house, as the crow flies, is just about a mile from the pipeline and not much more than a mile from the compressor station. So understandably, we're not thrilled with the concept. I have a prepared statement because speaking in public, the brain goes sideways. Both pipelines must be stopped. If there are no pipelines, there also is no need for midstream compressor stations, which run 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, spewing tons of toxic waste into our atmosphere and into our homes. Number one, the Constitution Pipeline is a greenfield project. It means it is on land not currently used for industrial uses or utility rights of ways. This is planned for 124 miles from Pennsylvania up to Schoharie. In Franklin, this land that it crosses was taken by eminent domain or by threats to the landowners of legal action. Private property taken for private gain by a corporation. This private land was originally protected for farming by Ag District law and local zoning laws supporting the town of Franklin's comprehensive plan. And yet, under the guise of energy exploitation, the Halliburton loophole, FERC has allowed this to happen. We must not lose Franklin's current greenfield status. Number two, the Northeast Energy Direct Pipeline, the NED, is proposed to be co-located with the Constitution, running about 50 feet on the downhill side from here of it for most of the 124 miles. This second pipeline is an example of what happens when you lose greenfield status. Once the despoiled right-of-way, other utilities can follow, whether it's another pipeline or whatever. So Franklin could get a second pipeline, and who knows, maybe a third. The proposed Marcy South 2 that's happening up on where our personal farm was near Treadwell is a good example of what happens when you lose your greenfield. That right-of-way is now being proposed for a second Marcy South transmission line down through the same right-of-way. Number 3, both of the above pipelines were proposed to FERC for construction supposedly because there's a wintertime shortage of natural gas for electricity generation in New England. This created a public necessity as how they went through it to increase the transmission capacity to New England. We're standing next to that smell, but quite frankly, folks, this is a load of shit. The capacity of the existing pipelines that are currently going to New England is twice the current use of what they use in New England, with the exception of a few months in the wintertime. But there is another option. There is a company that already exists in New England that make liquefied natural gas that could fill these gaps in the wintertime, and that could easily make that shortage go away. In fact, those companies have come out against the pipelines because guess what? Their bottom line would increase if they could just liquefy and develop that gas instead of building another pipeline. Number 4, what, if any, local benefit justifies this permanent destruction of this 124-mile, 100-foot wide swath of greenfield? And that also could result in midstream compressors. A few landowners, unfortunate enough to be in the proposed path, will receive compensation. Some will do it willingly, many will do it unwillingly due to the power of eminent domain. The town of Franklin will receive increased tax assessment for the improvement, if you can call that pipeline an improvement, and the associated infrastructure. However, the assessed value will soon be reduced from the actual construction cost, which if you and I are buying a house, we get assessed at the actual cost that we paid out, not so with compressor stations and pipelines. That initial assessed value will also be dramatically reduced by negotiations by IDA, the Industrial Development Agency. These IDA agreements are designed to create jobs. They're called pilot payments, payment in lieu of taxes. For example, the Hungry Hill Compressor Station in Hancock is on the public record as paying the town of Hancock only 50% of the taxes that would have been assessed if assessed at full value. And Schoharie County is receiving even less. Hello, Mr. Monopoly. Now, IDA projects are designed to create jobs. That's one of the main things they do. They bring in industry to create jobs. So, how many permanent jobs were created at Hungry Hill? 1. That's right, folks. 1 permanent job for 1 employee who is already employed by Dominion. And how much natural gas will be delivered locally? None to Franklin. Leatherstocking Corporation, which is a joint venture of Mirabito and Corning Glass Corporation, has already told the Franklin Town Board that it's not economic to invest in the infrastructure for the distribution to bring the pipeline to the village of Franklin and Franklin Central School. There's not enough profit in such a small entity to recommend or result in the investment. Number 5, what is the real reason for both pipelines? Exporting gas to the higher profit global market, which will result in the currently low prices that we see of natural gas in the United States to eventually rise to world price. So who benefits from this higher market price? The gas corporations and their CEOs. Who loses? The communities exploited and destroyed by the pipeline and compressors, and ultimately all domestic natural gas users who will pay a higher price. So how does it get to these global markets? The Constitution goes from Pennsylvania, picks up the Marcellus gas, and takes it up to Wright, New York. There it joins the Iroquois pipeline, which is an existing pipeline, has been for years, whose purpose was to bring natural gas from Canada into the United States. Iroquois have already filed to take and reverse the flow on that from south to north, which will transport gas to Canada for exportation. The NED pipeline, the NED, also ends at Wright. That's the supply line, they're calling it. The market line goes from Wright on into New England, where it will connect with existing pipelines to Nova Scotia, Canada. Originally, the pipeline from Nova Scotia brought Canadian gas from the maritime provinces down into New England. However, natural gas supplies in Nova Scotia over the last 25 years have gradually depleted. As you know, all gas fields deplete. 25-year lifespan is about all we can expect out of Marcellus. Two LNG, which is liquefied natural gas companies, Paraday Energy and Bearhead LNG, have already filed with the United States Department of Energy, the DOE, for permits to import gas from the United States for the LNG world market. Folks, these two pipelines and their compressors must be stopped. Thank you.
That was Don Hubbard. I don't know if he introduced himself. That was Don Hubbard. I'd like to call Dennis Higgins to the microphone. He's got a few words for you as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Dennis Higgins. I live over in Otsego. We will also be impacted by this. This is a letter that I wrote Governor Cuomo about a week ago on the anniversary of Katrina, and with the Pope's encyclical open on our laps, let's take a few minutes to consider the monumentally bad idea of the Constitution pipeline. We're told it will supply needed gas to New England, but as we see, pipeline capacity to New England already exceeds demand twofold. Originally, we were told this would supply central New York with cheap gas, but leather stocking has gone back to Pennsylvania, and we also heard Cabot's CEO tell shareholders he simply planned to get gas to Canada the cheapest and quickest way possible. Constitution pipeline advocates paint a rosy picture of the Constitution pipeline project, assuming that we in New York have forgotten the big messes created by the Iroquois and Millennium pipelines. We continue to grant certificates despite the failure of recipients to uphold New York's high standard of water quality. Since Williams and Cabot will be building this colossal catastrophe, we should briefly review their record elsewhere. The Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission levied the largest fine against any oil and gas company for Williams pollution of Prather Spring in 2010. And in Pennsylvania, Williams Company paid the most fines in 2013 for excess erosion and drilling mud spills into creeks during pipeline construction and underground boring operations. We can't list all the ruptures and explosions here, but in the past year, 2 Williams pipelines in Marshall County, West Virginia, broke due to heavy rain. Pipelines breaking from heavy rain, kind of a scary thought. Explosions and fires on a pipeline in Plymouth, Washington, and a gas processing plant in Opal, Wyoming, caused injuries and the evacuations of thousands. Cabot had 480 violations for its 489 wells in Pennsylvania. It seems like that must be some kind of a record. Essentially, every single one of Cabot's wells had safety or environmental violations. Would you say that this is a company that respects the law or thumbs its nose at regulatory agencies? The New York DEC told Constitution Pipeline it must use existing utility corridors for its right-of-way, but perhaps Constitution Pipeline has as little regard for the DEC as it does for the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. Instead, Constitution Pipeline will mow down nearly 1 million trees. That's about 30 contiguous central parks across the western slope of the Catskill Mountains, one of New York's great treasures. The New York State DEC and the federal government require that any stream crossings be drilled 6 feet under streams, leaving the bank vegetation and beds undisturbed. But Constitution construction plans ignore this too. They will trench all the streams, effectively guaranteeing scouring, migration, flooding, and pipeline ruptures. Building in a greenway allows CP to use a cheaper grade of pipe too. Constitution Pipeline assures us there will be mitigation and very little net loss of woods and wetlands. But where is Constitution Pipeline going to put the new 1,000 acres of forest that they will exchange for the western slope of the Catskills that they plan to destroy? Constitution Pipeline proponents want us to consider the thousands of temporary jobs the pipeline will bring and the handful of full-time permanent positions. Of course, the bulk of high-paid construction work will go to out-of-state employees. Maybe we should really consider the thousands of jobs along the pipeline right-of-way we will be losing. Maple syrup production, fishing, hunting, and guiding services, nurseries and gardening, businesses, and dozens of farms. Perhaps we might also want to consider the loss of property values that will come with the pipeline and the exodus of income to the state in localities from vacation and retirement homes along the right-of-way. Who wants a vacation home sitting next to a compressor or a potentially leaking pipeline? Remember what the Pope says about preserving our fresh water, providing excellent advice to the DEC. Fresh drinking water is an issue of primary importance, since it is indispensable for human life and for supporting terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems. Sources of fresh water are necessary for healthcare, agriculture, and industry. Water supplies used to be relatively constant, but now in many places, demand exceeds the sustainable supply with dramatic consequences in the short and long term. End of quote. Constitution Pipeline enjoyed a quick and successful FERC review, despite the 10,000 or so substantive environmental comments. As we know, Constitution Pipeline itself paid the contractors who performed this review, and it has been years since FERC rejected anything. But perhaps FERC can't really afford to turn down proposals, however problematic or frightening they are. Remember, FERC salaries are paid by oil and gas companies, effectively making this a commission that works on commission. In lieu of applause. Worst of all, in flood-prone central New York, which has experienced multiple 100-year flooding events in the last decade, Constitution Pipeline is using a 5-year flood plan. This means their construction may successfully withstand a 5-year flood event. On the anniversary of Katrina, let's consider what a 100-year flood will do to barren hillsides, trench streams, and the pipeline itself. Let us follow the Pope's advice and not let Constitution Pipeline be the message we send to God about our stewardship of the earth. From the Pope's encyclical, the Earth's resources are also being plundered because of short-sighted approaches to the economy, commerce, and production. The loss of forests and woodlands entails the loss of species. Each year sees the disappearance of thousands of plant and animal species which we will never know, which our children will never see, because they have been lost forever. The great majority become extinct for reasons related to human activity. Because of us, thousands of species will no longer give glory to God by their very existence, nor convey their message to us. We have no such right. Let's stop the Constitution Pipeline, folks. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. I have a few remarks that I would like to read to you myself. I'd like to talk about eminent domain. The Constitution does not authorize eminent domain. Eminent domain is a common law concept that predates the Constitution, but the Constitution limits it. The Fifth Amendment to the Constitution of the United States is entirely about ways in which the government cannot abuse people. Grand juries, no double jeopardy, no self-incrimination, due process, all those things. The final phrase in the Fifth Amendment is, "Nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation." In June 2006, and this may surprise some of you, President George W. Bush issued Executive Order 13406 that further limited eminent domain. It stated in Section 1 that the private property that the federal government takes for, quote, public use with just compensation must be for, quote, the purpose of benefiting the general public. Bush's order further limits this use by stating that it may not be used, quote, for the purpose of advancing the economic interest of private parties to be given ownership or use of the property taken. Wow. Thank you, George W. Bush. Yeah. Here on this hilltop, we have the Constitution Pipeline already approved, and possibly the Kinder Morgan NED pipeline with its compressor right down the road. The companies who own Constitution Pipeline boast on their websites that the pipeline will carry fracked Pennsylvania gas to Canada, where it will be exported, presumably because the companies think that they will get a higher price in Europe or Asia. Or perhaps they just want their investors to think that. But whatever the truth of the matter, in either case, they are violating not only the spirit of the Fifth Amendment, which says that public property may be taken for public use, but also the letter of Bush's order that says that property may not be seized to advance the economic interest of private parties. How then is it possible that FERC has given the right of eminent domain to the Constitution Pipeline Company? How can they claim that this pipeline meets the standard of public convenience and necessity when the gas it will transport will go abroad and not profit us in any way, while the Williams Company will sit back in Texas collecting millions in transport fees, and we bear the burden of threats to health and safety, threats to the purity of our air and water? This is clearly a violation of law, and the phrase unconstitutional pipeline is no slogan, but a literal description. This is nothing but the theft of private property for corporate profit. Those whose property has been taken by eminent domain have been robbed, and with the connivance of the government that is supposed to protect them. Write to your congressmen, write to your state officials. This is an outrage. This is a criminal enterprise, and we must all fight it right down to the wire. Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Anybody?
I'd just like to put some numbers on what was just said to show what kind of stealing, you could call it, is going on. For our land, we were offered most $107,000 for about 0.8 mile. When they switched the land to approximately the same distance on our neighbors, they offered $2.5 million. So that's the kind of effect the eminent domain has. When they say they're paying fair market prices, now we can say, fair market price, look at these numbers. Approximately 25 times more money when there is no eminent domain, when you don't have the power of eminent domain. That's what you were willing to pay. So that's put numbers on these on the effect of the eminent domain power that was given to the Constitution Pipeline.
Thank you, Bruce. Who do we have? Bob Ackerman.
Well, I live down on Water Street in the village of Franklin, and I hate to see reversals of really positive trends on this earth. For instance, I don't know how many of you noticed the peregrine falcon that flew over us when we started to assemble. That peregrine falcon ranges all over these hills and down over my house. The eagles are back at great effort by ecologically oriented organizations, academicians, and those who are willing to brave climbing trees and poles and so on. And so the symbols of America are coming back. I think it's a terrible paradox that while these wonderful birds of prey have come back, we're going to have perhaps a compressor over here when it belches out the overpressured gas will be either killing them or they will be leaving the area. Further, I think it's a cruel paradox that our governor's committee decided that we shouldn't have fracking in New York State. New York City's watershed rejected fracking in the area of the reservoirs, yet Pennsylvania, which did accept fracking, is going to send all of that gas through New York State. I think that's a cruel paradox. I think we need to block that, and I hope we don't have this horror coming to our area. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bob. Susie Winkler.
As frightening as this proposal is for the Northeast Energy Direct and the 30,000 horsepower compressor station that's cited to go down the road, I'm afraid to say that I believe that this is not the end game. That, in fact, this is about the industrialization of our entire pipeline corridor. That, in fact, may well just be the beginning. As we all know, the Constitution pipeline wasn't the end game. The Constitution brought us the Northeast Energy Direct proposal. And the Northeast Energy Direct proposal brought us the Sano project for the Iroquois pipeline. So we can see there's a pattern forming here. This is industry's playbook. It's called segmentation. They introduce these projects in small little bites so that communities can swallow them. But in fact, the projects are much bigger than any of us can imagine, because gas industry's appetite is huge. I'm going to give 3 examples that show this pattern. And these 3 examples are playing out right now around us, north and south. The examples are all about segmentation. And they do segmentation for 2 reasons. It makes it easier to approve a project. Complete projects would trigger more regulation and stricter processes for permitting. So that's the first reason. And the second is that if they introduced the greater projects, communities would never accept them, and that adjacent communities to the projects in which the infrastructure was passing would be irate as well. So the communities would just be in uproars. So in fact, they do it in little bites. So it's one community at a time. We need to stop that. And in fact, the good thing about all of these projects is that people everywhere are starting to wake up as to what might be coming down the pike for them. The first project that I was going to talk about is the Millennium Pipeline, and what that's doing to the mini-sink community, which is in Orange County. When they introduced the mini-sink compressor station, there was in fact no CPV gas-fired power plant proposal. But as soon as they approved the mini-sink compressor station, that's when all of a sudden the CPV gas-fired power plant proposal was introduced 8 miles away from the mini-sink compressor. They didn't introduce that project until mini-sink was approved. Second story, that's the same thing that what Dominion's Transmission, Inc. is doing in Myersville, Maryland. That compressor in Myersville, Maryland, which that community fought tooth and nail, went to court over and lost. That compressor went online on November 1st of 2014, this past fall. On November 14th, 2 weeks later, that's when Dominion introduced the next project, which was an expansion of the compressor that opened 2 weeks earlier. It only took them 2 weeks to run that compressor station before they introduced a proposal that would double the horsepower. They were introducing an additional 15,900 horsepower compressor that was going to go into the station. They knew that was coming, but they didn't tell the community. Once the community had the first compressor, they couldn't stop the second one from coming in there. We have to stop this here, now. Third story, and there's a lot more of these stories, but the third story is another Dominion Transmission, Inc. pipeline that's going on in Minden, New York, or Fort Plain, New York, which is an hour north of here. And that compressor is 11 years old. It's part of a 50-year-old pipeline. After 11 years of running 1 day a week in the winter, that community was introduced to an expansion that would triple the capacity of the compressor. And instead of it running 1 day a week for 4 months of the year, now it's going to run all the time, every day, putting gas from the Dominion onto the Iroquois. That hooks up with that Sono project that Don was talking about earlier. So it's insidious. That community had no idea. They were living with a sleepy compressor for 11 years. And then this triple expansion falls onto their doorstep. They're like blindsided. So that's what they do. That's what the industry does. This is their playbook. They put projects together in bite-sized pieces so that we can swallow them. What they're doing, the industry, is building an infrastructure network, a web of pipelines that'll put a stranglehold on our hopes for renewable energy future in New York State, and that's unacceptable.
Amen.
So we're here to repeat this phrase over and over again. We need to demand that Governor Cuomo and the DEC deny the 401 water quality certificate for the unconstitutional pipeline.
Thank you, Susie. Carol Lee Burns from Otsego.
The Constitution Pipeline, one of the partners in the project, Cabot, is shipping fracked gas out of Pennsylvania and buying it at the other end in Wright, New York. The cost of production of fracked gas is higher than the U.S. sale price, so companies are going out of business. The economic model can still work, though, if we let Williams and Cabot destroy 1,000 acres of old-growth forests and 300 streams on the western slope of the Catskills. That is, it will work out for Cabot if New York will subsidize their gas to Canada venture. Lawmakers in 2 of our neighboring states have called for a probe into FERC's rigged system. We have to ask why our New York legislators are asleep at the wheel. Both Massachusetts and New Hampshire legislators have pointed out to FERC that they do not need another pipeline, that no pipelines should be built until the leaky ones are fixed, and that pipelines threaten human health and the environment. In the meantime, FERC commissioners are doing what FERC commissioners do. FERC commissioners are former oil and gas execs whose salaries continue to be paid by oil and gas companies as long as they approve projects. On paper, the projects look pretty good if you trash 10,000 public comments and only read the environmental impact statement prepared by the applicant's contractor. Did I mention eminent domain? So New York gets the environmental degradation and enjoys land theft as part of the Constitution Pipeline project. Which part of this looks good to you?
Kate O'Donnell.
Hi. I wanted to put into perspective where these pipelines are going to be, and the people from this community know it well. Where are they going to be as we look over this beautiful valley? They're going to be right in that field. Both pipelines. Where is the compressor going to be? Right over this little hill at the farm, right? Laura's Chocolates. And how far is Otsego and the schools in Otsego, how far are they from here? Otsego, speak up, how far?
Mile and a half.
Mile and a half.
And Franklin.
Franklin, how far are your schools from this compressor site?
About 2 miles.
2 miles. Oneonta, anyone from Oneonta here?
About 8 miles.
6 miles. I mapped it. I'm from Oneonta. Sydney, how far?
8 miles? I don't know.
Okay, map it. You can do it with Google Maps. So we are talking about putting a toxic infrastructure in the laps of our communities, in the mouths of our children. This is insanity. This is illegal. This is unconstitutional. Now I'm going to follow up on something that Susie said about Minnesink, where there is a compressor. And one of the quotes from the people at Minnesink is, "We can't breathe and our lives matter." And that's the case here too. With that compressor, we won't be able to breathe and our lives matter. Our lives matter! Our lives matter! So, this is why we have to let Cuomo know, let the DEC know. We've been flooding them with information, with calls, with emails, because these pipelines are going to flood our communities with toxins and with water the next time we have the 100-year cycle hit every 5 years. It's going to flood like hell in this whole area. So we have to let Cuomo know we say no to this unconstitutional pipeline. Deny the 401 water quality certificate, right? And that's why we're here today. We say our lives matter. Our lives matter. Our lives matter.
You don't know me, but I'm your neighbor. I've been living in Otsego or Delaware County for 40 years. I live on Route 357. I could see the path where the proposed pipeline, the pipeline that we're going to stop, is going to run. I'm good friends with farmers whose lands will be traversed by the pipeline if we don't stop it. You people with your paper face masks on should throw them away right now. They're a joke. Because every one of us is going to need one of these to stop the VOCs, the poisonous gas, and it's not funny. I'm wearing a Ground Zero hat from the Ground Zero Blues Club in Clarksdale, Mississippi, where I played a couple of years back. This, my neighbors, is Ground Zero.
Yeah.
We're at Ground Zero, and we got to stop the industrialization of our community.
Yep.
It's our moral duty.
Yes.
There's a question that gets asked. It said, why are you here? Why are we put on this earth? And the answer is, when you find a reason why, you'll find a way how. The reason why we're here is to make this world a better place for our children, for our children's children, for our neighbors.
Yeah.
Don't you know me? I'm your neighbor. It doesn't matter what my name is. If I took my mask off, you'd know me by my name. But you know me by my soul. It's the soul that I share with you. It's the soul that I share with the sacred Mother Earth. God bless you all for what you're doing.
Amen.
Keep coming back. We've got a fight, the good fight to wage.
Yeah.
Thank you. My name's Bill Kitchen. I got here a little late, so maybe this was touched on, but
It's okay.
this is sort of a follow-up on the last speaker talking about moral obligations and future generations. In a big picture way, we all know that fossil fuels lead to climate change and that is really starting to spiral out of control. And we've all been seeing pictures on the news in the last week or two about the refugees flowing out of Syria. And there was that one especially tragic photo of the young 2 or 3 year old boy that washed ashore. He also lost his brother died, his mother died, the father lost everyone in his family, took them all back to Syria to bury him. And the news coverage focuses on things that should be focused on, like ISIS and Assad, and that's the reason a lot of people are leaving. But what you may not, some of you may not know, is that there have been studies that show that all the uprising and a lot that's happened in Syria started with the worst drought they ever had beginning in 2006 that lasted for years, and a lot of the rural residents in the eastern part of the country that exist from farming and whatever, because of the water shortage, they had to move to the already overcrowded cities, and that tension helped spark a lot of this unrest that has led to the violence we see now. And so that's just another reason why natural gas is just another fossil fuel, is bad or worse than all the rest of them. And that's another reason why we need to move away from this stuff and get on to renewables quickly, so we don't keep having more of these kind of disasters happening around the world, which everybody's predicting, just like they predicted climate change, which we're now seeing. And these poor countries, you get a drought like California has, California and the United States can maybe deal with that. These poor countries really can't. And so we all have an obligation, and especially in this country, because for most of the CO2 in the atmosphere, and now a lot of the methane in the atmosphere, comes from this country. And for a long time we didn't realize what we were doing, but that excuse went out the window a long time ago. And we do know what we're doing now, and that's another reason why we just have to stop this.
Do we have any other speakers? Don would like to share one more short. Remember to vote for Don in November if you're a Franklin resident.
I just wanted to share, currently there are 750,000 miles of transmission lines in the United States, crisscrossing all over the place. 750,000 miles. Now on the other side, the distribution, where it takes you from that pipeline and brings it to our towns, our cities, our countries, our communities, our schools, there are 2.5 million miles of distribution lines. That's a lot of trenching, digging, and whatever in itself. But the thing that's unsettling to me is that once that pipe is in the ground, it's there forever. That steel is gone. There's no way somebody's going to go out there and dig it up and recycle it like you do a used car. Not going to happen. So all that infrastructure is really kind of a giant Ponzi scheme that the gas companies and the oil companies and these people use, that the new money, the new investment keeps the machine rolling, keeps the dollars coming into those companies. But allocation of resources, whether it's personal, national, or international, if you spend dollars here, you can't spend it there. All that steel could be going into our bridges, our skyscrapers, whatever you need, that it's lost in the ground forever. So, we need to just stop this insanity.
Let's not forget now, November's coming soon. We need to get people in that will fight for you and put laws in. The new administration right now says no laws. They don't want to put anything. So if you want somebody to represent you as a citizen, you'll have to vote for me and Don. Yeah. And 41 votes isn't going to cut it for Don. You have to step up to the plate. And hopefully you'll get the right people in that will fight for you. Not people that are just going to say, here's 800 signatures and just put on the side. That should be going down to the DEC and Kinder Morgan's FERC meetings and stuff, instead of just putting it to the side. That's what I would do. And also lobby in January when we have to go lobby in Albany. We need to get things done. And it's not going to get done by sitting around and not doing anything like they do. And just pass the buck. We don't have enough. There's 2,400 residents in the hamlet of Treadwell and Franklin. And let's not forget, we have to represent Treadwell, too.
Yeah. Let's go.
All right? That's what it's all about. So let's get the word out. Happy Fire Bevilacqua and Don Herod. Let's vote for them in November and let's get them in. Yeah. Thank you. And thank you for coming.
Susie Winkler would like to do a picture of all of you, I think, with this background. That's all missing nothing but a pipeline. to make it perfect. And she wants to take a picture of all of you facing this way. Is that right?
You need to come together. If we need to come together, and maybe some people kneel. Mr. Monopoly, help! Someone's got to get inside. And more. You need to come together more so we see the valley, see the density of you. You need to do it now. We can't do it.